All right. Every meeting that we do is kind of like a snowflake, right? It's a little bit different than any one that comes before or after it. They're all very unique, but they're all very special in their own way. This month is a very, very special one for us because we don't always feature a guest speaker, but when we do, we try to bring somebody of value and somebody that has maybe insights that we wouldn't necessarily have. Now, I know that all of us have experience in viewing addiction from different perspectives, right? Whether it's somebody like Josh who saw the effect of direct addiction on his life, whether it's somebody dealing with a family member that's struggling with addiction, or really even somebody that is a friend or an associate or a coworker that deals with addiction. We've all kind of seen addiction from different perspectives and in different ways. But our guest tonight, um, in addition to being, I don't know what I would have to call a highly visible member of the Coheed community, she's also an incredibly accomplished individual. I would list all of her degrees and certifications, but I will tell you that that would take half the meeting. She is also one of the kindest and most caring individuals that you will ever come across. And not only that, but everything she does is considered and thoughtful. And we could not be more pleased to have her associated with Drumset Confessional. And the person I'm speaking, of course, is the person that you see pinned on the screen. It is Dr. Kimberly Johnson. She is a board certified forensic pathologist. And as a pathologist, she sees the toll of addiction in a setting and in a way that many of us will never see. Um, and it brings a unique and interesting perspective to the concept of addiction. Um, and with that quick introduction, because I don't want to take more time, I'll ask Josh, do you have anything to say before we get started?
No, not really for once. Just really looking forward to anytime I get to spend any kind of time in the same air as Kimberly. I'm excited. I think Rob made it really clear we just adore her. So, no, I think this is a meeting that me and Kim just saw each other in Vegas, and we were talking about, this meeting. All the meetings are supposed to be very open. It's about whatever anybody wants to talk about. And I think that's never been more true than in this meeting. And with that, I think we'll roll it over to you, Dr. Kimberly Johnson. And yeah, if you're ready, take it away. I will quickly, though, Rob, it's like freezing every now and again. Is that happening to you guys?
Yes.
Yeah, I think Rob might have a situation with his Wi-Fi going on.
I
But
I
Rob,
checked
he'll
my
get it straightened out.
I checked my internet and I'm good for right now, but I'm gonna go see what I can do to help free anything up.
Yeah, it's weird. So,
Um,
sometimes it's like a ghost in the machine type thing, Rob. All your stuff. I mean, if you're having problems in the tech world, what chance do I stand? You're like a tech wizard to me. Um, okay, well, I guess if it's happening for everybody, I just wanted to bring that to the light. But with that,
Thank you so
Kimberly,
much for the kind introduction. For those of you who don't know what a forensic pathologist is, I am the physician who performs autopsies on individuals who have died, and then I formulate a report and I determine the cause and manner of death, which really guides what goes onto the death certificate, and then also goes into national statistics. So when the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, which is actually based here in Atlanta, um, they pull out these causes and manners of death, and they try to put out statistics so we can try and, from a public health perspective, track what's going on. And is there ways that we can come in and intercede? And while my day-to-day work is very much in death care, as we call it, a really cool part of my job that I think most people don't understand or don't really know that I get to do is the public health perspective. So I actually get to help the community and identify opportunities, moments where we can go in and intercede, whether that includes support services, mental health services, harm reduction services, or even just identifying what drugs are killing people. How some of the drugs work. One of the big contributors to death is the opioid drug family, originally coming from opium, which is a flower, which then got converted into morphine. And then that got turned into heroin. And then after that, we've got other opioid drugs that have been manufactured by some scientists, some mad scientists, because they've been altering these drugs in ways that were never intended for human use. And what they do is they affect these neuroreceptors in your brain. And some of them cause, but actually some of them can also cause hallucinations and paranoia. And so a lot of the drugs that are hitting the streets are causing the adverse effects, and people don't know what they're getting. And that's actually where my job comes in. And I actually have a 2-slide PowerPoint that I'm going to briefly share, just to kind of put a graphic to what's actually happening in our country. I don't know how I share, but we're gonna go for it. Can I share, Rob?
Oh, do you?
I don't think I have permission. Maybe. Well, basically,
I don't think he's
what the
in here,
graph,
Kimberly.
yeah, that's fine. So basically, what the graphic shows is we have fentanyl, which I think a lot of people have heard of. Okay.
Of course.
It really hit the market in like 2010, but then it took off in about 2015, and it's just been skyrocketing. And what's unique about fentanyl is not only does it cause the diarrhea and pain relief, it actually also paralyzes the diaphragm. And why that is really great in medicine when you're in a surgical procedure and you have a whole team of experts breathing for you. When you're out in the community, you don't have somebody available to mechanically breathe for you. So overdosing on fentanyl becomes even more challenging, because all of a sudden, not only is it decreasing your drive to breathe, which is what it does in the brain, it also affects the muscle that helps you expand your chest in order to breathe. So it's twofold dangerous. Now we take that a step further, because it's about 30 times more potent than morphine and heroin. And so, people who are used to heroin then take something that's 30 times stronger, and you're like, oh my gosh. Well, the other variants that they make, carfentanil is one of the big ones, all fentanyl, 4-fluorofentanyl, bunch of scientific words with fentanyl kind of in there. They're up to 10,000 times stronger than heroin. And that's not safe for anyone to use at all. And the hardest part of all of these drugs is that the way that they're marketing to individuals. So I think some is usually a blue pill, and it has an M stamped on one side. On the other side, it has a 30. It's called an M30 pill on the streets in colloquial terms. But what people selling drugs realized is, as long as they press a pill with an M and a 30 on it, they can sell it to people. They can claim it's oxycodone, but it's actually fentanyl. It's actually xylazine, which is actually a pet tranquilizer that has been taking off recently, or carfentanil, or any of these other drugs. And they're not actually getting what they think they're getting, and what they might know in their usage schedule, their safe amount to use. That the public health crisis is confronting is that, yes, we have the individual level of addiction where individuals need help and support, getting through what they're going through, support services, all of that. But then we also are confronting this market of individuals that are trying to make money off of these drugs, putting things out there that people have no idea is what they're getting. Additionally, street Adderall is actually methamphetamine. And they make the pills specifically to look like it's supposed to be like an orange pill and it's supposed to have these numbers pressed into it. These individuals are doing that. They're making it look exactly like if you went to the pharmacy and got the pills yourself. But what's actually in the pills is what's scary. And that's my job. So, an individual comes in and they've died and we're trying to figure out why. They're young, otherwise healthy, what's going on? And we have to be able to figure out how to test for all of this, because no one, comes in with a little note saying, here are the things that might be in my system. And so we have to challenge the toxicology lab. We don't know what they look like. We don't know what their chemical structures are. And so we're kind of guessing and trying to, track the trends so then we can put notices out there for people for safety. And one thing I think that the community here has done really well, as uptick in certain drugs happen, they put out community warnings. Hey, just so you know, if this is the kind of drug that you might be seeking, please be careful. These things might be present in it. And while that's really, and it's sort of an infomercial, if you will, it's making people aware that they need to stop. And, you're not going to be like, maybe not this, pill. Because if you've got it, you've got it. And so to me, that's something that's really hard to confront, because, they're not thinking about the lifespan of this individual, because there are so many more individuals that they have to sell to. So they're not worried that if they accidentally put too much of the carfentanil in it, that it's going to kill whomever that they sell it to, because that is not their perspective. They have, over 109,000 people die a year from drugs. So they have a huge population that doesn't die and survives and is able to continue into this. Not only are they making the drugs stronger, not only are they not telling you what's in the drugs, but they're making them look like something that seems safe and familiar to individuals that might be seeking them. And that is extremely hard to combat, because how do you talk about that? And then in addition to that, they mix them. So some individuals intentionally will go out and get maybe fentanyl and maybe a little cocaine or methamphetamine, because they want to kind of balance the way that their night or weekend goes. Some people don't want to do that, but it's all in one pill. And if I had identical, but then when we do the toxicologic testing on them, they're actually a combination of all of these drugs. And that is ultimately what is leading to these deaths, is there's no safety profile on any of these drugs. And I know we all know that because you're not buying them from an FDA regulated source. But at the same time, I don't think there's enough knowledge out there that, that's what's happening. So then how do we save these lives? So there are huge pushes right now in our country, which I think have been amazing, by different organizations like End Overdose, where they're trying to put out these, can reverse some of the drug effects so people can get to the hospital safely and survive, like Narcan. Well, unfortunately, Narcan does not work on some of these new drugs. So no amount of Narcan that you give is going to be able to reverse the effects of drugs like xylazine or carfentanil that is 10,000 times stronger. So it's designed to reverse, oxycodone. It's designed to reverse fentanyl. But something that's 10,000 times stronger, not only would you need numerous doses, you need medical support immediately. So to me, it's important to talk about these things, because, a lot of focus gets put on the individual, and a lot of focus gets put on the medical institutional system. But this sort of social economic piece that's in the middle, I think, is a huge contributor, to what's going on. And talking about it is important, making people aware. Hey, yeah, you think you're getting this blue M30 pill, but just know that there are people out there making blue M30 pills with a whole bunch of other stuff in them. And one thing that I'd like to talk about, because one of our partners is End Overdose. You can do a free online training with them. And at the end of the training, they send you a kit for free. And it comes with first aid information, how to use the Narcan, comes with a CPR face shield in case you actually need to start CPR. It comes with Narcan. But the other really cool thing that it comes with, which I left on the counter over there, are testing strips. So people can test the drugs that they might be using and identify xylazine. They can identify fentanyl. Someone might be in the throes of use. That harm reduction piece, I think, is a bridge that can help some people towards recovery. There's no one path to recovery, and I think that's our overarching message here at Drumset Confessional. We want to support everyone where they're at and where they'd like to be, and then find resources that we can get them to. I know we've talked a lot about SAMHSA, which is a national website that you can type in your zip code. You can find resources anywhere in that zip code, from mental health to crisis intervention to getting in for detox or any overdose. We talk about other organizations like Heart Support for mental health. We talk about Punk Rock Saves Lives, like all of these great organizations that already exist out there, talking about those. But the awareness that there is this sort of malicious component in the drug sales world is what I see, and it's unfortunate. And I wish that I didn't see so many individuals in my line of work, in general, wholesale. I wish fewer people died. But also, from what I see as preventable deaths, grows to a ripe old age of 90 years old and dies of heart disease. Okay. Long, beautiful life. Someone who's very young and got the wrong drug or didn't know what they were getting, and then unfortunately dies unintentionally in an accidental overdose. Like, as a society, I feel like we had an opportunity to prevent that. 100% of the time, absolutely not. But the more we talk about it and educate not just people who are using, but people who are just in the community seeing things happen, it's hard to fathom that there are people out there who are intentionally making these drugs as potent as possible with absolutely no regard to who these drugs are going to. But unfortunately, that's the world we live in. So that's just kind of a little bit about what I wanted to talk about. But I also encourage, doing more research, more reading, just to, make you feel empowered that you know about some of these topics. Because the more you can talk about this with people in casual settings, the more they feel comfortable being like, oh, maybe that is something I need. Maybe I need these testing strips because maybe I'm not ready to discontinue my use at this time, but maybe I want to make sure that I'm safe. And xylazine, unfortunately, is the big one that's beginning to take off. That unfortunately is really dangerous. And there's no reversal agent because it's not designed for humans. There's nothing that's ever been tested on humans. There's no drive for the pharmaceutical companies to create a reversal agent for it because it's not meant to be ingested. And unfortunately, it causes a lot of the same effects. So it's going to look very much like, a different opioid overdose. And there's no harm in giving Narcan. That's one thing I also want to reiterate. I was recently on a flight, and unfortunately, a young individual was overdosing, and I was informed that only a doctor or nurse could administer the Narcan. And that is just not true. But that was their policy. And if you think someone is overdosing and you give them Narcan, you will not cause them harm. You might cause them a runny nose. You might have, they might cough a little bit because they have the nose, but it's not going to make the overdose worse, or cause other complications that weren't already in progress. So I encourage everyone to feel safe using Narcan, and that's why it's become over the counter like this, and it's available for ubiquitous use. I do think the most important lesson, though, is if you think someone is overdosing, call immediately for medical help. As a doctor, I went through med school, so I also dealt with living individuals. And there is no triage where we are thinking about the legal ramifications about why you're there. We are thinking about how are we going to save your life. So the sooner we're able to get in and help potentially mechanically breathe for you, potentially get you through the overdose, the better. And I know there is a fear of the medical community and sort of what can happen if you call for help. But Narcan is not a fix. It can help people, and some people, that's all they need, and they actually end up surviving, luckily. But a lot of the times, you're still metabolizing the drug in your system, so that a Narcan is just a bridge to get you to medical care. But I think that's pretty much all the topics I wanted to cover. I am admittedly very tired. I was in Vegas this morning, and I flew back on an early flight in order to be here for this meeting. Yeah. But and I work tomorrow, so here we are. But I encourage any questions or thoughts that people might have that I might be able to explain further.
Well, Kimberly, and if Rob didn't make it clear before, anyone obviously questions for Dr. Johnson, are welcome, as always, in every meeting, are so more than welcome. But I have some questions for you, Doc.
Sure.
So I'm almost like afraid to ask this. It's, I think all of the people that have overdosed in my life, I think, I talk to my friends that have survived, and I think we're of the general mindset that their death wasn't painful. And I'm just curious to ask, we have a doctor here. What's your take? What do you think happens when someone overdoses? Do you think, or do they just, because it's a nice thought for me, and life was great and they never woke up. But when you talk about suppressing the diaphragm and being unable to breathe, in your medical opinion, what happens when they OD? Are they out and are they gone? Or do you think, is there signs post-mortem of any type of pain? Or really, it's just an opinion, Kim. What do you think that people, or is it always different?
So I do think it depends on the drug that's ingested, but for the purpose of this conversation, if we're talking about
I'm talking about heroin overdose.
Yeah, yeah. So what ends up not able to breathe to the point that it affects an area in the brain that says, oh my gosh, we're not getting oxygen. And that sort of suppresses consciousness because your body is going into sort of a survival mode. And from what we're able to understand, because we obviously, for very many ethical reasons, can't put someone in a functional MRI while they're overdosing and watch them die, because that would be horrid.
Fair enough.
From what we understand is that loss of consciousness is sort of that loss of awareness from what we consider sort of the foremind. We actually don't really know. But I would say that I do think it's sort of a loss of consciousness, a loss of awareness, and sort of a, slow slip into oblivion. But unfortunately, it depends on the amount of drug that they take as well, on how long it takes for that process to happen.
I understand that. But I imagine there's different factors, right? But when someone overdoses on heroin, we found friends of ours that have overdosed. There was no sign of any fight for life. It was, they died right then and there without so much as a whimper. And to be in pain, were they scared? Were they aware? And these are the things this is part of my survivor's guilt, that I spend a lot of time thinking about my friends that aren't here. I know this is a weird question to ask you too. So I really appreciate, though, like the kind of professional medical understanding that you have in passing that along, because a slow drift, as you said, is what, and it might seem meaningless to you. Sometimes I latch on, I get all cry just thinking, I don't want them to have been terrified, or I want them to have slipped off. But okay.
I would say most often individuals that we find.
You want to elaborate on with that?
So I would say most of the individuals we find look like they were in the same position for many, many hours before they died. And so that kind of comes into play for our understanding of like losing consciousness and ability to sort of function. That was it. I think Josh is frozen. So if anyone else has anything that they'd like to share or questions.
Yeah,
I'm just
I think the freeze is on Josh's end this time, not ours.
yeah,
So
good.
for I want to make one comment that we lost Josh. So uh, uh, Randy, if you could, when you keep your eye on the chat and readmit him, um, is he back? No, not yet. I will tell you that it's amazing to me some of how unaware I was even of simple things in conversations that I've had with you. And it's one of the reasons why I was so excited to have you here, because you just bring a perspective that just none of us really can ever have. I remember early on we were talking about just something, and it's a simple thing, right? We were talking about little things that we could give away to promote the DSC name and get it out there. And one of the things that I thought of is a little tiny keepsake box. And you're like, no, that's probably not a good idea, because as you see people come in, you see things and you see how people store their drugs and all that. And it's just amazing to me the things that you have seen in the perspective that you have that would never even really cross my mind.
Oh hey, I got the share to work.
Oh, good.
I just
Yeah, I switched a couple of things to try to make that happen.
so I just want to show this picture that I was talking about. So
Yeah,
this
please.
top left is what comes from the pharmacy, and this is what is on the street. And same here and here. And the description below tells you, but this is actually oxycodone and this is fentanyl. This is Adderall
Wow.
and this is methamphetamine. And this is Xanax and this is fentanyl. So if you were expecting Xanax and you get fentanyl, it's a very different thing. And yes, it's a different color, but off brands do create it in different colors. And then same for these fentanyl pills. They have decided to make them in rainbow colors. So now fentanyl does come in every color of the rainbow, which they still all look the same. So if you're not a pharmacist or aware, you're getting purple fentanyl, you're getting blue, green, all of the colors, and then all of these fentanylogs, or I like to call them frankenfentanyls, because they are distorted fentanyl molecules that are way more strong and just not intended for ingestion. They also are coming in these colors. So even if you think like, okay, the purples of the earth, you're not getting the same thing every time. And that's what we're learning with our postmortem toxicology is that we can't predict, even if we have drug paraphernalia, even if we see it, with the individual, we can't actually predict what's going to be on their final toxicology. And that to me is the scariest part, is that the way that these individuals seem to be preying on people who are in active addiction with just no regard for what the end outcome might be. And that's why we have to talk about it. And it's uncomfortable for some people to the more we are able to sort of have these open and non-judgmental conversations, I think the safer we can, make people's lives be, no matter where they are in their journey, whether they're in full recovery, where they're transitioning into recovery, or they're still in active use. There's always something that we can do to help with the safety profile and help support them.
Absolutely. It's funny because before you mentioned the connection between the work you do and public health and awareness, I honestly, before we had those conversations, I never would have picked up on that connection. But you are truly, you let everybody on the front lines, from users to treatment people, know what they're facing out there. And I just, you should be, applauded for the work that you do. You're amazing. I just want to let everybody know, Josh had a computer problem and he's trying to get back in, but when I'm sure it will be a few minutes before he gets back in. But while we're waiting for Josh to return, we got a couple of questions from or comments from people in the room, and so we're gonna go first with Raz.
Hello. Can you guys hear me okay?
We
Okay,
can.
cool. So I was really excited about this meeting in particular because I work with 2 or 3 different harm reduction organizations, and it's my job to spread information on substances and how they can affect the body. So this was a really cool meeting for me to finally make it to one, because the information you're sharing is life-saving and hugely important to anyone who interacts or has had an. There are a couple things I wanted to add from a harm reduction perspective that I think would be really helpful for anyone who wants more knowledge. There are 2 orgs out there that have testing kits that you can buy for yourself with full instructions on how to test substances if you are in a state of recovery or not yet recovery, where you may still be using and want to make sure that you aren't going to die. Dance Safe is one of these orgs. You can buy a full 9 reagent testing kit from them. Bunk Police is the other org. Both of these orgs do a lot of life-saving work. They, I think, the 16 most common substances that get seen at like big events. And then the other thing I wanted to mention for people who are looking for more information is that Dance Safe does a super comprehensive, in-depth free training on substances and how to de-escalate from substances if you end up in a situation where you are interacting with an individual who may not be in a good headspace and may need help. I can throw the link for the training in the chat. I just did, and it is super in depth. They once you take the training, you can contact Dance Safe directly, and they will set you up with events in your area that may need help with things like drug testing or information administration to people at big events. The other ones that are super helpful have already been mentioned, and that's Punk Rock Saves Lives, another org that does shows testing, free things you may need, Narcan, and then End Overdose, which is the really, really big one that we love, because anyone can be certified by End Overdose. A huge, helpful kit to have. So I just wanted to mention that those are some extra resources if you are looking to be active in your community and help people. Those drug testing kits are life-saving. I keep one in my freezer in case someone ever comes to me and says, I don't feel safe about a substance. Can you help me? Bunk Police also has those testing kits. And all of those orgs are great sources of information if anyone needs more info. So those are the. It looks like Randy's got the link in the one for the training in case anyone wants that training. And if you ever need harm reduction questions and you see me in the Discord, hit me up. I've got all of the training under my belt to give you more information.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's also a good reminder that if anybody wants to join our Discord, it's open for everybody, and there's a whole great community of people that share ideas, information, and resources there as well. All right, we have Josh back. Thankfully, I think he's on an 8-bit computer now. He's a little bit pixelated, and I don't know how well we'll be able to hear him, but
every time you talk, it breaks up.
Yeah, story of my life.
Can you guys hear
all right,
me?
but you can hear us fine, all right?
Yeah, I can hear everything fine. Everyone is frozen on the screen, though. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah, you're moving like Max Headroom.
Yeah, I don't know.
For those that are, nobody's probably old enough to remember Max Headroom. I just revealed my age. Okay.
We're just showing our age, Rob. I know Max Headroom. Yeah, I wish I could fix it. I don't know what to do. I X'd out of everything. There's no open tabs. Extender. It says my Wi-Fi is flying right now. I don't know. I don't know the answer. I probably have to restart it, but I don't want to do that right now.
Yeah. You're all right, though.
Myself, perfect. Just everybody else is frozen. But I'm hearing everything. So, yeah, let's just continue, and I won't talk because I think it gets choppy on you.
We will continue, and the next hand that we have up is Ryan.
All right. Of course, I'm going to raise my hand. I can't keep my mouth shut. A counselor or a CDCA, so I can counsel in the realm of drug and alcohol. I don't really touch on mental health until I get, some more schooling under my belt. I'm a sober living coordinator for a program here in Columbus, Ohio, by the name of High Life Recovery. Um, we have 3 separate portions to our program. First and foremost is our sober living program, and that is an abstinence-based program. We do allow Vivitrol shots. We're not taking Sublocade at this time. Beds available. I'm in the trenches over here. I have 24 clients right now. I have four female clients, and I have 20 males. All at different phases of the program. Some are celebrating a year, some are celebrating 2 years, and all the way down to 2 weeks right now. And I get to function in the realm of their individual counselors. I I get to function as a case manager, which actually I really enjoy being the case manager aspect because I get to take them out and do things with them, show them self-care techniques. With the level of with which practice case management, I mean anything and everything under the sun. Like I can take guys to the gym, I can take them to 12-step support group meetings out into functions in the area and really show them and help them cultivate a sense of fellowship and community here in Columbus, Ohio. Um, but I really appreciate what you had to say, Kimberly. Like, from a science and medical aspect of it, the program director for my program, he's a medical doctor with a minor, so he's super intelligent. We get a lot of facts from him, but at the end of the day, like I really felt like I learned some more things today. And when you were mentioning xylazine, like that's hitting Ohio hard right now, like in the rural areas, first and foremost, you know. So like that takes me into the next aspect of our program, and we have started a harm reduction program. We call it reduction recovery. You know, and I was very close-minded to it. It's a very controversial subject. You know, I was the one and done, went to Gene, you know, and bought all in on the 12-step aspect of it. I could talk politics all day long about recovery, but you know, after working for this program for the last 5 years, it's opened my mind and it's opened my eyes to a lot of different avenues to sobriety, you know, and with this reduction recovery aspect of things that we're 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 leading the way on. There's no other programs in our area that do anything with harm reduction. You know, a lot of commercial insurance kind of programs, your nonprofit residential programs, but you know, education is the most important thing. And in the 10 years I've been sober, I've buried over 100 people. You know, these are people that were closely related to me, like friends that I had when I was in sober living, or people that I met out in the rooms and 12-step meetings, or you know, acquaintances that I've had, or you know, I've shared in losses with other people from all over the US and all over the world, and people that I met during COVID and Zoom meetings, much like this one, you know, that have passed on, and it is forgiving and unrelenting. So I'm going to show a little gratitude, and it's good to hear the science and medical aspect behind it. And it's a stark reality of what we're up against right now. You know, we're on the front lines of this, and going out into the community and raising awareness. And you see like end overdose, and you know, I met you a couple weeks ago at Furnace Fest, right? So like that was a great introduction, and to see end overdose there, to see punk rock saves lives there, and like really reaching out, it really touches a certain place in my heart, you know. And I'm passionate about this way of life, but you know, I have to stay right for myself in order to stay right for other people, you know. And I talk with these guys so often about, you know, like not feeling fearful of talking to somebody, you know, or talking to the right people or getting educated, you know. The last thing we need is more lives taken. And this whole thing, you know, hit the ground running in 2014, and fentanyl has just taken off to the point where I don't even
Yes.
think. And also, I wanted to ask you real quick, and I'm sorry for hogging time, but we've been noticing a higher uptick of alcoholism and less of substance use in the last year. Um, is there any more information that can substantiate that? Because, you know, majority of my clients right now are all alcoholics. Like I have a handful of people right now that are using fentanyl or other substances. Like it's scared the shit out of them to the point now where they would just rather drink. You know, it's kind of gone with the tides. Like in the 90s when it was heroin, and you know, when it was crack in the 80s, like you'd see this rise of alcoholism. Have you noticed any of those numbers? And that's it. I'm gonna
Um,
sorry.
so the alcohol numbers have always been pretty high. Um, but for us, what we're seeing is it's like alcohol and other choices. So whether that involves driving or jumping into a swimming pool or into a lake or other things. So will contribute ability to survive environments where if you were otherwise sober, perhaps you would have the wherewithal to stand up and get out of the water. But maybe if you're not all together there, you're not able to. But here, where I'm at in the country, it's still very high drug use. And actually, I had a heroin overdose 2 days ago. So heroin is still present down here. But I do think it's regionally. But I will say nationally, since 2019, we muted them. Since sort of the COVID times, there has been a huge increase in both substance and alcohol use as a country. And I do think that trend is something that we are finally getting the data on because we're about 4 or 5 years out now. But that increase in use has been absolutely astronomical across the board. And I do think there was a social aspect to that change, and how people were able to interact with each other or not interact with each other, and coping mechanisms they may or may not have sought. I do think we're beginning to sort of very much so. And I also feel like that's another area that we need to start discussing. What are the mental health impacts of living through that period of time? What are, the physiological impacts? We're also seeing increases in cardiac disease, people who seemingly had long-term viral complications. And there's all sorts of things happening that we're still trying to figure out. And so as a country and a whole, I would say yes. There's been more increased usage, but abundant usage. An interesting point, I guess, for my job, when signing out a death certificate, where I think chronic alcohol use was what caused all of the problems that led to their death. I always say complications of chronic alcohol use. And there is a huge push to try to destigmatize the language we're using, because the word abuse can really impact the family and can sort of impact the community when they hear the word abuse or disorder or any more charge, say like they chronically use this thing, it caused these medical complications and that's why they're dead. But we're not trying to make a judgment on the death certificate. And I think same for drugs. So I'd say the toxic effects of fentanyl, because that is why they died. The toxicity of the thing they ingested. And again, we're not trying to put that judgment into, the death certificate, because that's not where, judgment doesn't belong anywhere, but it definitely doesn't belong there. But I do agree that I do think there has been an uptick in alcohol consumption in general. And there is also this belief that is safe, because it drives a lot of people's choices, is that fentanyl is scary now, right? As we just talked about, more infographics get out there saying how dangerous fentanyl is, but there's not the same billboard that says, oh, hey, alcohol can be dangerous too. Because, it functions differently, but, I do think there's a misconception. And then once people are in it, they're in it. And then, they need
the alcohol billboards say almost the opposite, don't they?
Yeah, like enjoy yourself, have a beer, and you're like,
right.
Oh, okay.
So I think we really
definitely.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say I'd really like to link up with you and have you come do a presentation for some of our IOP groups. I think the clients could really benefit from some education. I love to have guest speakers, so I'll be in touch.
And you're always welcome to direct them here as well. So
absolutely.
So I think we have Raz has her hand up again. I think she has a response to something that Ryan brought up.
So I just wanted to mention specifically to Ryan, because you do run a harm reduction program in your job. As long as you're contacting them, Dance Safe specifically, through your organization, They have xylazine test strips that now exist and can test substances. DampSafe is not releasing them to the public, but as long as you're ordering them through like an organization, a company, a wholesale account that DampSafe can work with, so that you can make sure things are as safe as possible within your harm reduction agency if you're interested in that.
Excellent.
I will link it in the chat so that you can find where to find those xylazine test strips, and you can just contact them and let them know, hey, this is what we're doing. We're interested in your test strips. How can we get some of those to help our people? So that's all I wanted to say.
Excellent. Beautiful. Thank you. Oh, all right. So let's see. Do we have other hands up?
I can hear you, Josh.
Well, Kim can hear me. I feel like Rob
Yeah,
can't
we can hear you.
me.
Yeah, we got you.
Well, I just wanted to, it might be premature, but Ryan and Dr. Johnson and Raz, these are people that are, I heard somebody say it, maybe Ryan, maybe you said it, but on the front line. And I think it's important for me to say, you guys have my undying respect. And there's so much I have to learn. A lot of this world is so my version of it is so antiquated. I don't want to sound like Ryan this story. Last time we were together in your car, I said it was news to me that addicts would actually seek out fentanyl. I'm sure we have a total contingent of people that say, whoa, this fentanyl stuff's crazy. Let me stick with the bottle. That's a whole other thing. Alcohol is deadly, dangerous drug. There's no doubt. But it was news to me. I really, without giving it much thought, I thought of fentanyl as somebody copped their drugs and said, oh no, there's fentanyl, but that's not true at all. People want the fentanyl. You can't, and friends of mine who have relapsed recently said exactly what you said, Rye. You can't even find crack from the early 2000s anymore. It's not even on the street. It's all crack with fentanyl. And I assume that's true for the dope too. Somebody I know that relapsed in the last few years told me, they said the first time I tried the fentanyl, because we were talking and we're friends, I said, God, what's it like? I mean, in my day, there was fentanyl lollipops, but these were for like cancer patients that couldn't swallow. It was like a medical grade. It wasn't this stuff. It wasn't this stuff that's on the street now. And he told me, he said at first, he said it was real muddy. And what he meant by that, maybe that's New York slang, real dopey, and that he didn't like it. It was real chemically, he said. And then he said, after a week, it's all he wanted. He didn't even think about regular dope anymore. And he also said kicking it was even harder than kicking dope. And I think whatever you're most recently kicking seems like the hardest, but with how powerful that drug is, I have to imagine that's probably true.
But it changes your brain too. So like it upregulates receptors in your brain. So you need
what a frightening notion. I mean, sometimes I hear these stories and it's like when I talk about my own history with shooting heroin and being addicted to heroin, sometimes it feels like I'm talking about a different guy, man. And in a way, it's almost the game has moved so far beyond me. I have so much to learn. Most of my learning comes from listening to people like you, Kimberly, and certainly Ryan. But listening to Raz, and it's really important that I express my respect and my admiration for you guys. I want to do more. I want to do everything I can to try to keep people here. Rye, it cracks my heart into two pieces when Rye says he lost 100 people. And that's a real number. This guy's on the front line with real people really suffering. That's my connection still. I don't feel like that same guy that shot dope every day just to get through the day. my connection to it is the suffering. And I know that people are out there suffering. And I want to be part, I want to do more. And you guys are really like my heroes. So I just wanted
They
to
are heroes.
express that. They are. You guys fucking, all that question I asked you before, Kimberly, is kind of weird. But what? I don't have a lot of opportunities where I'm talking in this kind of like down to earth way with a doctor. And it's something you just really gave me a gift. Because I think about, I think it's part of, call it PTSD or part of my survivor's guilt, that how often I think about what was going on with my friend. So I thank you for that. Sincerely. Thank you so much. And just for anybody out there that's listening that doesn't have experience as a junkie or as a dope fiend or whatever, as an addict, I think it's a sick line of thought, but Rye knows what I'm talking about. Back in my day, admittedly, like I said, different era, but when somebody would OD a town over, that's where we would go to try to cop that same dope. When someone died, that's what we wanted. It wasn't like, whoa, 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 someone died, steer away. It's horrifying to say this, but it's the truth. I see Rye shaking his head. Yeah, this is the truth. This is a junkie mentality. Whoa, that shit killed somebody. We need to get our hands on that. That's good. That's powerful, potent stuff. And I wonder how much that standing here is this version of myself. I say, how could anybody ever do any drug? Not now. Back in my day, if somebody handed you an Oxycontin, it very well might have killed you, but it was an Oxycontin. Or if they handed you a Vicodin, it was a Vicodin. Nowadays, you have no idea what that pill is. It's indistinguishable. In fact, and I'll shut up after a second, sorry. But there was a story, a friend of mine had a good friend who was taking Xanax through his doctor. This is how he got through the day. He had run out. He needed 1 day's dose, and he copped it on the boat. He's been on Xanax for 15 years. It was indistinguishable. I'm sure you can guess the ending. It wasn't Xanax, and he's no longer here. But think about this person who's taken this pill, held it in his hand every day for a decade and a half plus, wasn't able to tell that something was wonky with his pill. It's exact. So how could you, and these are the conversations I have with my 20-year-old daughter. It's the other thing that keeps me up at night. You try to arm them with every, but you can't. It's not like in my day. You fuck around a little bit, you experience, you have some, you can't, I mean, well, you're risking your life even more so than in our day, right? Which is just, it was already dangerous enough. We already lost so many people. We took this ultra dangerous thing and then upped it by 10. And it's just a really, pardon the pun, sobering thoughts or horrifying thought. Okay, I'll shut up. Is there any more questions or any shares out there?
Josh, I got actually two things. I wanted, it's interesting.
Sure.
You talk about how when you think back to who you were, it's almost like it's a different person, and when you said that, I revisited in my head the conversation that we had about that first year when you were off of the first real year, as you called it. You talked about it giving you a chance to replant the roots of your brain, and that year off, you probably were thinking differently than you were even capable of before. And I think that's probably, probably reflective of that idea that it does mess with your brain.
Oh my God, it changes everything about your brain. There's no question. See, that's how it was presented to me by Dr. Ramaswamy, was of the dope. This is to replant the roots of your brain. And I guess, I don't know, I wish I could call it trust. It was more just, I was out of options, man. I was out of options. No one would trust me. No, with good reason. I had nothing good going on. Nothing good around me, because drugs, it changes your brain. Your brain has changed. Everything around you changes. You exist in this kind of pond of scum where most of my waking hours are spent either trying to fix up and these are the roots of my brain. This is is life. This is my life, to set up Christmas decorations. There was only time for copping dope to not be sick. That was my life. What was I going to hawk? What was I going to sell? It took years to become a different person. And those first few years were dicey. I always said, Robin, I said this to you many times, and people, my friends in this group have probably heard this before, but that first year plus, maybe even 2 years, I had kind of planned on using drugs again. That was my plan. I thought, well, at some point I'll use drugs again. It was only after I remember the year, a real year, the real year, saying maybe I'll see some level. I had still, the replanting was still going on. It took years, which is overwhelming. If somebody was in this group in active addiction and hears that, that sounds overwhelming. It sounded overwhelming to me. You know, you can't fix this overnight, unfortunately. But you can't get to step 100 without step 1, right? You can't get to anywhere good without taking that first step. But in my drug-addled, cobwebbed, overwhelmed, confused mind, somehow I fucking made it out, and when I hear these stories, thankful to be alive. I'm thankful to be here. Okay, I'll shut up. Sorry, I go on and on, but this shit is powerful to me. Obviously, I mean, it's why I do this. It means everything to me, and I just, again, I've been a part of so much bad in my life that I feel a calling to be a part of something good. And when I'm in the presence of people that are their time, effort, and energy towards helping people, I'm just really in awe of that. And heroes is an understatement, honestly. I think maybe we throw that word around a lot, but I think in this case, it's an understatement. Robert.
Yeah, I think even like some of you all work in these areas, and you know, it's what you choose to do with your time, I think, that makes a big difference in other people's lives. And it's just invaluable. It's invaluable. The way that you help people and educate people, and everything from helping somebody dealing with addiction through the first couple of months or years of their recovery, to helping an entire community of people through the education and resources and knowledge that you provide. Just invaluable. I can't say enough. So we're already over the hour. I want to give the last words to Kimberly and Josh. Dr. Johnson, do you have anything in closing you would like to share?
I've been talking with a lot of people recently, as I do. I'm a talker, just like Josh. But I think a really important message is, the journey. I do feel like at some point in our life, we will feel this sense of like brokenness. And that I feel like the more that we are open to and accepting that that's okay. Like it's okay to be imperfect. And it's okay to have these pieces that aren't what society expects you to be, but it's what you do with those pieces, And I feel like this community is really trying to promote that idea that perfection isn't what we're going for. We just want to be the best versions of ourselves that we can be. We want to help others achieve that goal too. And I think it's important to also understand that is constant. I don't need to try anymore. It's constantly reworking and rethinking and how we're engaging with other people and continually learning. And I think the most important message from what I said today is that there's always more to know and more to understand. And so the more we talk about it, the more we continue to engage with it, I think the more we're able to help save at least one life, because as Josh said, we want to keep people here with us. And that's my end goal. Every day, unfortunately, my job, we've lost people. But the idea that fewer people, I think would be amazing. But just knowing that in and of yourself, like, it's okay to be imperfect, I think is an important thing to think about, because, society doesn't really market that idea. It says you have to be these things, you have to look like this, you have to do these things to be successful or accepted or happy or whatever end goal that you want. And I don't think that's true. And I think that's a huge component of addiction and mental health, is that we have to retrain our brains, and we have to go on this journey, and we have to actively engage with our own self-awareness that, okay, I'm thinking this a safe way of thought. Like, how can I make sure that I'm rewiring myself to make the best decisions for myself at this moment? And I would just encourage everyone to continue to promote that in themselves and their friends and their family, is that it's okay. And it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to ask questions. I'm always here. There are no like weird medical questions. Josh, I am asked your question all of the time. You are not alone.
Okay.
A lot of people really want that closure, and I think that's a beautiful part of my job, is that I'm able to sit down with families, even talk it out with them, and provide that sort of medical knowledge and closure. And that to me is the beautiful part of my job. But so please, ask questions, reach out, and just I encourage people to love themselves wherever they're at, and continue to love themselves wherever they go.
Thank you so much,
Beautifully
Dr.
said.
Johnson.
Yeah.
I have to read the words of Janine in the chat. She said, I thought I could make it through one meeting without crying, and then Kim's final words get me. So you touch people in a lot of ways, Dr. Johnson. Josh, last words before we close it up tonight.
Yeah, and I won't say too much, but Rob used the word invaluable before. That's a really great word. What a resource that Dr. Johnson is saying. Ask me questions. It's an intimate group that we have here, and I would urge people to take her up on that. Kim, I do have one more quick question. Is there ever times that you guys are stumped where you just don't know why someone passed away? That happens?
Yes. It happens more often than I would like.
Oh, wow.
But there are situations where we don't have enough investigative information, or we don't have the toxicology ability to test for things that might have killed someone. It completely unrelated to the other drugs. The strips are very common in prisons now, and it's literally pieces of paper soaked in chemicals that people smoke. And a lot of the compounds in there, we don't have the ability to test for yet, and they cause and so we'll get otherwise healthy young individuals, and there's nothing we can find looking under the microscope. There's nothing we can find in our exam, and unfortunately we end up saying like probably this thing, or we'll just say undetermined. And those cases are the hardest for me, because I acknowledge and recognize that for the people who loved this individual, that is not helpful. Like, it's not necessarily harmful, but it's not something that they can take and use to move forward with. And so those are often the hardest conversations I have with families, is I looked for everything. Unfortunately, I don't have a concrete answer. And some people just die suddenly from these dysrhythmias in their heart, where like their heart doesn't beat the right way. And we can't test for that after you die, because there's no way to that there is a portion of those undetermineds that we do believe are drug related. And I say that because we'll find paraphernalia at the scene. We'll find them in a position where it looks like they haven't moved for hours. So it kind of is telling a story of perhaps they ingested something. But limit to what we're able to detect on toxicology testing, because we have to know what the molecule is in order to interpret the peaks on the mass spectrometer and assemble it into this molecule that we can identify. So if we kind of don't know what we're looking for, we can't reliably identify it or figure out what it is. And that's also a huge part of my job is, raising suspicion, calling the lab and being like, so I really feel like there's something weird in this individual's blood. Can we send it out to a national lab? Can we do what's called a low dose extraction? Because some drugs, it literally takes a grain, like a grain of salt, to kill you. And so it's so low that the normal testing doesn't go that low to look for levels. So you have to go a layer deeper. But yes, that was a long answer, but sometimes, unfortunately, we just don't know.
Well, I appreciate your long answer. A lot of my life outside of drugs, my body's mysterious, man. I have a very, had a heart surgery at 39. So I just always curious about definitive answers, but I really appreciate. I could sit here with you for 6 hours and just be asking questions. But so for the next meeting, you guys, I really hope to hear some shares from you guys, and I'd like to get into something akin about redemption, about kind of facing down, and this is true of addicts and non-addicts alike, facing down our past selves and kind of changing the narrative built around us and kind of carving out a life that you're proud of, but having to see, if I'm going to be frank with you guys, we did like an AMA and I talked about some of the stuff with the documentary and some of the stuff with DSC and having to face down some maybe preconceived notions about me, and still working even after 15 years away from drugs, and still kind of working on some of the damage that I've done to my reputation, and kind of absorbing that and still meeting it face on. Because I can, it's a great line of thought to say, hey, don't care what anybody thinks, but I care about the people that I respect. I do care what they think about me, and I care the people I love. Surely I care about what they think about me. And I just think that's something interesting to get into. That's something that's going on in my life and always is. I think as a former addict, I'm constantly still 15 years out, kind of faced down with that version of me. To just really quick, there's in Kingston, where I'm from, there was a guitar player that I was in a band with briefly, a really respected player. He's just known as this really great player. And we asked him to join our band, and we had a record deal at the time. This is pre-Coheed, and great player, young guy filled with life. He went away to Colorado, and he came back, I don't know, 20 years later. And when he came back, I was a full-blown junkie, and he had hit me up, and we spent some time together, and he was clearly in a bad place. It was alarming to see him, but he didn't do the drugs that I did. He wasn't a heroin addict. His thing was pills and stuff. Well, anyway, he ended up dying. He passed away. Someone that does what Dr. Johnson does, now the rumor mill gets spreading locally too, but people that were very close with this family said it was, I guess we don't use that word anymore, unalived himself. Right. So I just want to be sensitive to anybody in here. I don't want to say something like the dimwit that I am and offend somebody, but y'all know what I'm getting at. He took himself out. It was on his 40th birthday, and have it from a reliable source that it was without question. Somewhere along the way, a rumor started that I gave him those drugs. Now, this is so wildly outside of reality. Not only did I not give him drugs, I never once in my life gave him drugs. We didn't do drugs together. And I'm only reminded of this and in terms of redemption, and is recently, a guy said to me, he said, man, I know you're a different guy now, but I can't shake your hand after what you did to Jay, and I was flabbergasted. And I'm a sensitive guy. I'm standing there at the softball field with like tears in my eyes because I know what he's talking about, because I would hear this around and it's just not true. But I think I have to acknowledge my own actions have kind of maybe led to some of those stories. And I think there's a lot to think about in terms of redemption. Again, addicts and non-addicts, our past selves, our lives now. And we talked before about putting our best foot forward. So I just want to hear from you guys. I always come into these excited to hear from you guys, from the guest speaker. Kim, you're here all the time, but you should come and talk every time. You're so smart. You're so forthcoming. It's just such an opportunity to get to hear you speak. Same thing with Raz, same thing with Ryan. And I just maybe like give it some thought about redemption, about past lives, meeting up with these lives. And I look forward to next month. It's going to be closer to Christmas. This will be even more Christmased out in here. No one's brought up that they don't think I'm insane for having a Christmas tree up already. I just want to say I'm going to Australia, so I'm going to miss Halloween, and I'm going to get back mid-November. And I had to get a head start on the Christmas stuff. And again, though, during my addiction years, I never put up a Christmas decoration. I didn't enjoy things. So again, to me, this is like a flagship. This is a flag in the ground. This is me kind of earmarking that I like my life and I enjoy things. So there's a lot with the Christmas. There's a lot beyond just silly decorations. And I really enjoy it. And I know it's super silly, but and that's about it for me. So I hope next month I get to hear from you guys as much as you guys want to. I want to hear from every person in here, honestly. I think that's really what turns me on about this. Believe it or not, me talking isn't what turns me on about this. I get turned on hearing from you guys. So thank you, Rob, of course. And sorry about the technical difficulties. I'm the worst. And yeah, I'm looking forward to next month. You got anything that you want to close it out with, Rob?
Well, I just want to close out by, again, thanking Dr. Johnson. Just wonderful information from a wonderful person. Everybody that showed up, everybody that supports us along the way. It doesn't go unnoticed. We certainly appreciate everybody. Everybody in the chat. Remember that the community doesn't end when the meeting ends. We have a Discord. And people are available to chat, share, and communicate with each other there. All of our core team members, Randy, who volunteered to help us post links in the chat tonight. And so and Josh, as always, buddy, thank you, man. We have a direction for the next meeting, and I will start promoting a meeting where we can talk about redemption or facing our past selves. I think that I think a lot of us do that. I do it my own way, and everybody does it. So to one degree or another. So with that, we're going to close out. I will tell you that I'm going to try this month for the first time, instead of posting the recording in Patreon, I'm going to try to put it on YouTube to make it more accessible to people. That was a suggestion that came from our core group, and I think it's a great idea. And as much as as the guy that's trying to make this thing viable and run, I'm always trying to push people to Patreon. I'm going to put this one out on YouTube and make that available. And look at Randy on the spot, already has our YouTube channel. If you are not following us on YouTube, please follow us on YouTube. YouTube calls it a subscription. You subscribe to our channel, and you can set notifications when we put out new stuff. But unlike other subscriptions, it doesn't cost you a thing. The subscription on YouTube is the equivalent of a follow on any other social media platform. So with that, I'll say thank you. I appreciate you. I would like to note that in the last, 10 minutes of the meeting, all of the internet issues went away and we were lag free. But thankfully it doesn't really affect the recording. So again, everybody that came tonight, all of our Patreons that make everything possible, please make sure you're following us. Even set notifications for us on social media for when we make announcements. You'll know. We've got a couple of big announcements coming up next week. And with that, I will say good night, and we'll see you all soon.
Later, y'all. Thank you, guys.